All right. So you've already heard who we are. We're coming to you from Kalamazoo, Michigan, in our own little homes. But the idea behind this talk started at NAGC in 2010. I went to a talk called Organizationally Challenged, How Developing Executive Function Can Help the Gifted. And it was presented by two of my friends, Ellen Fiedler and Michelle Kane. And I learned a lot when I went to that presentation. Some of it I knew, but I learned a lot. And they did a great job with the presentation, but they spent a lot of time on the research. And so they went through all of the research and about what it was. And then with like 5 minutes left, they got to the strategies of what you could do with these students. And so I thought, you know what, this is a great talk. We should give it. And so I asked them if we could borrow their slides, and they said, sure. So I took their research slides and cut them in half. And so we're going to go through a little bit of the information behind why students are organizationally challenged. And then we're going to try to spend most of the time doing the tips so that you can actually learn a lot of different tips. Because as you'll see, you need lots of different choices. So the first thing is executive functions. So what are executive functions? Executive functions really are the conductor of the brain. So the better the conductor, the better a person is able to manage their actions, and so they can achieve their goals, complete tasks, and direct their behavior. So teachers and support people in a gifted child's life expect that gifted students don't need to learn to manage themselves. They expect them to already know how to do these things, and that's just not necessarily the case. So we're going to tell you a little bit about what executive functions are, and then some strategies and how to help students with them. So the executive function process, that the two main parts of the executive function process that has educational implications is those organizational skills. And people, know pretty much what organizational skills are: setting your goals, organizing, time management. May not know that it also has to do with inhibiting actions like speaking out or, cutting in line or those kinds of things. But it also governs the higher order learning skills. And so this is a big thing with gifted students, because if you have executive functioning, maybe not deficits, but if your executive functioning is not as high as your academic levels are, then these things might be hard for you as well. So metacognition, learning about learning, may be hard. Monitoring your own goals, self-regulation, but self-evaluation. So a lot of the teachers in our English program want the students to write something, a reflection about how they did this semester. And that's hard for students who don't have executive functioning skills. And then also thinking and acting strategically is something that happens with executive functioning skills issues. So these are all things that everybody learns how to do. And just like some people learn academics at different ages than others, some people learn and process things better with executive functioning at different ages. So you can have a student that is high academically and just normal executive functions, or low executive functions. You can have them all over the place. And executive functioning processes are not actually complete until usually the mid-20s. And so you're going to get some of these issues you're going to have until you're over 20. And so you're not expected to be, like old me on some of these executive functioning issues yet. So there are a lot of things that we normally would have with students having executive functioning issues. So if you have a student that you think maybe has a deficit in executive functioning skills, you might think about these things that they would do. So they may not manage their time well. They don't get things done on time. But you may not know that it's also hard for somebody that doesn't have good executive functioning skills to do multiple steps. And so this isn't just like, take out the garbage and feed the dog and do three chores at home. But this is also when you're doing problem solving. So if you're doing problem solving, they'll skip a step in the problem solving strategy, or they'll skip a step in their math assignment. Those are actually executive functioning issues. Taking notes is very hard for those students with executive functioning issues. My son is really good on losing the important papers or possessions, because he can never find where anything is. And then the other one that is a typical thing is having difficulty with transitions. So those younger students especially that have a hard time switching from playground to academics, or from home to school, those kinds of transitions. But there's also problems that students have that are basically because they're gifted. So why are these students, so these students that are gifted students, they may also have some issues with executive functioning. And some of them come and look like they don't know how to study. Part of that's because they've never had to study, so they don't learn those strategies, but part of it is also that they may just not be up to the task. Math problems, just the answer pops into their head and they don't know how to write the steps that go with it. And you have a hard time writing a paper until you can write the entire thing in your head, or that you get things mixed up in your papers. Gifted students in general sometimes tend to have a frustration or low tolerance for personal errors. Students with executive functioning deficits will also have that. And then the long-term goals are very hard for them to think about. And also they may not understand others not feeling things as deeply or as well as they do. So organizationally challenged is something that a lot of gifted kids are accused of being. And part of the reason is that they already have good memories and they just rely on it until they can't. And when they can't, then they don't have the strategies to be able to learn things and to be able to remember things and to be able to do all the steps in something. And so they haven't learned how to rely on, they always rely on their good memories. They haven't learned how not to. Gifted kids tend to have a lot of interests. So they have so many things going on at the same time. They are not really able to keep track of everything. So they may be asked to have higher executive functioning skills than their typical age peers have. Gifted kids are internally motivated. They don't want you to tell them what to do. They want to get there on their own, and they want to know how to, they want to do it their way. And then I just said they don't have those skills. They haven't had to learn those things because they've been able to keep all of their, their plates in the air in the past. And well, organization's just mundane, and sometimes gifted kids just don't want to do the mundane. And it turns out that the brighter the kids are, the more likely they're going to have issues with organization. Now, that does not mean that they really have issues with organization or they're, lacking the executive function skills. It just means that their executive functioning skills are not up to the level that the grown-ups around them think they should be. So especially in gifted kids where they learn things at different rates, the asynchrony of those children, then they may just be a little bit normal in organizational challenge, in their organizational functioning, and yet it looks like they're behind. And gifted kids can be organizationally challenged just like regular kids. So you got both of those things happening. So you get, a lot of times you'll have the adults in a organizationally challenged student's life very frustrated because they think that you can tell me all day about this math concept that's way over my head, and yet you can't put down 3 steps to solve your algebra problem. And it gets very frustrating for the adults and then for the student as well when they can't do all of these things that everybody's expecting them to. So we're going to talk about some strategies that can help these gifted kids. hopefully get more organized.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the idea that you have to find an organizational system that works for the student. And this can be difficult because a lot of teachers and parents will go, this organizational system works for me, therefore this organizational system will work for you. And that's just not always the case. Everybody has a different system that works for them, and part of what you're going to be asking students to do is kind of be their own Sherlock Holmes or their own scientific researcher and figure out which system actually works best for them. I have started having open office hours for our students who are having organizational and time management issues during the pandemic because they don't have as much time, alone with their teacher to kind of figure things out. And one of the first things that we sit down and talk about is, how can I figure this out? How can I do the research to figure out what system works for me? So one of the first things that we find is really helpful for students is color coding. And a lot of people are like, well, color coding seems very juvenile. And then have to tell you that color coding doesn't just work for kids in elementary school. Color coding also works for middle schoolers and high schoolers. We talk about things like having different colored folders and stickies and index cards and markers for the different categories of everything they want to keep track of. They might have different color categories for classes. They might have different color categories for extracurricular activities or different things that they have to put on their calendar. It's helpful if you make some sort of chart or key so that like everybody in the family who's trying to help you knows, what color is coordinated with which thing. And then your student gets to figure out where that chart or where that key gets to be. Some of them might like it in the kitchen. We have one student who likes to post all of her stuff on her bathroom mirror, but just keep the chart where everybody can see it so everybody's sort of on the same page. Other uses for color coding might be like things like outlines. My daughter really liked to color code her outlines so that every point that she was making in her paper was, in the first paragraph would be colored some shade of green, and then every point in the second paragraph might be coded some shade of pink. And for kids who are very visual, that can be really helpful. If you're not visual, maybe not, but you can color code all sorts of things, notebooks, stickies, folders. One thing I want to say is that we recognize that these materials can be pricey. And if you're a family with, financial issues, making sure all of your sticky notes and Post-its are color coordinated may be something that is, not first on your list of things that you feel like you should be paying for. But as a teacher, if you have people who are making donations or contributions to your class, putting some of that towards items that help all of your students be more organized might be a good thing that you can do for your students. The other thing that is really big is the timers and alarm clocks and watches. A lot of times we find that kids these days actually do not really know very well how to tell time. They aren't teaching telling time a lot, especially not with the kind of clock that I grew up with, that actually has hands very well in schools anymore. And we also find that a lot of kids don't have a good feel for like how long a space of time is. If you tell a student, you're going to study for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour, they just have no concept in their head of how long that space of time is. So things like timers and alarms and those kinds of things can be really helpful if you have a student who struggles to, like, say, get their homework done because they just can't sit still. We're only going to do this for 15 minutes, and you set the timer for 15 minutes, and then you let them have a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, and then you can do it for another 15 minutes. And then, you can lengthen those spaces of time in between so that they can figure out how that time works. And one of the ways I use actually with smaller children is to try to think about what is one of their favorite cartoons and say, okay, if your favorite cartoon is Bugs Bunny or SpongeBob, how long is one of those? And have a kid think when they're watching about like what that length of time feels like. So they kind of start getting more of an idea in their head of time. When Kelly talked earlier about kids who have trouble transitioning because they have executive functioning skills, we see this a lot with kids. And one of the things that helps to keep them organized is what you call an advanced warning, or what my friends the Dorschwitz call a flower. I don't know why they call them that, but they have lengths of time, like 5 minutes. So like giving kids notice that, you know, we're leaving in 5 minutes, we're changing classes in 10 minutes, we're going out to recess in 15 minutes. Helping those kids make those transitions is really helpful. If you can put clocks in the rooms, you know, where your kids, even where they play, so that they get an idea, you know, we're going to be leaving in 15 minutes, so they can start seeing on the clock what 15 minutes looks like and feels like, can be a really good way to help them in as they start to develop time management and organizational skills. So a lot of our kids and students really like technology. You know, they get smart phones and smart watches earlier and earlier. I always feel like a complete idiot around most computers and phones, and I have to, you know, make my children tell me how to work everything. So it's not like you're going to ask them to do something and they're not going to know. They're going to show you how to do it. But they can be synced with each other independently, standalone. A Google Calendar is great for a kid who has organizational issues. They can create their own calendar online if they have access to the internet, and a Google Calendar is free and handy if they have a smartphone or if a parent does. And then the great thing is, especially if you have families that struggle with organization, that you can, the families can share a calendar and everybody can, you know, make their own calendar within the family, and then they can be synced together. This helps kids a lot, especially if they have a lot going on and they're not quite sure what they're allowed to do or what they have time to do. One example, so say you're planning to go to the zoo next Saturday, but you see, because your son has synced his Google Calendar to your family Google Calendar, that he has a big science fair project due the following Monday, and so maybe you need to reschedule. So sometimes we as adults don't help our students be organized when we plan activities, and we don't consider that they actually have time constraints that we don't think about. You know, we tend to think like, this is a nice day for us to do this, without considering, you know, especially if your gifted student has a lot, you know, as Kelly said, plates in the air, what those plates are and what you can cause to crash down because you weren't really thinking about what's on their calendar. And I have to say personally that Google Calendars also would be great to keep your husbands in line or your spouse in line. If I could get my husband to look at a Google Calendar, which I still cannot get him to do. When you see my calendar later, you're going to be like, really, you can't get him to look at the Google Calendar? That's bad. One of the things that can be useful for teachers to suggest to students are to, if you write your assignments on in a corner of your board, like a lot of teachers do, to let your students use their phone to take a picture of the assignments on the board. It's like you have like 30 seconds at the end of every class, like, okay, everybody who has a phone, take out your phone, take a picture of tomorrow's assignments. That way you don't have students who get home and say, I cannot remember what the assignment was. My daughter has ADHD, and we frequently had the, you know, she would get home, you know, 20 minutes after school got out and say, I do not know what the assignment was. And I had to ask teachers to like say, please don't, you know, tell them what the assignment is as they're running out the door. She's never going to hear that, understand it, or it's not going to sink in. So if you can put assignments up where kids can see them and then take that 30 seconds, that's super helpful. Also, if they don't like to take pictures, they can text themselves the homework for the class. We know that most teachers now have classroom calendars and that they're posting assignments in class calendars. And just, it's great if you remind parents. I know teachers would tell me that they had this class calendar, at the first school open house, like the second week of September. And by the, the third week in October, I'd completely forgotten that there was a class calendar. So just, and I'm sure you all do this, but you're reminding students and parents that, yes, I have a class calendar, so you don't all have to, email me at like 9 o'clock on a Tuesday about what the assignment is really good. A lot of kids like to have hands-on master calendars for their schedule, and those are great. Just a plain old to-do list, that's something that they can hang on the wall or carry with them. You can get free to-do list apps for the phone, which are great. This is one of those things, though, that you have to think about. This is something that works for me as an adult. I can't guarantee that this is what's going to work for my student. So this is, one of those places that it really helps for them to be the researcher, to figure out what works for them. I'm old. I like pieces of paper with lists on them that I can scratch off like old people do. But my kids wouldn't be caught dead with like a piece of paper. So their to-do lists are all, apps or notes on their phone. So you have to figure out what is going to work best for the student, not only the kind of list or agenda, but where they're going to keep it. Because again, my to-do lists are running all over my house, but a kid wants it a place where they can see it handily. They said our student Jessie likes to put hers on her bathroom mirror so she can see it every morning when she gets up. Some kids like them on their phone. Some kids like them, I'd say in a purse, but again, I'm old and nobody carries one of those anymore. So. And then we have master planners. And I know that a lot of schools give out master planners, or at least they used to. And I know my kids' school used to, require every kid to write in their planner. And it was a big point of contention between a lot of the students and a lot of the teachers, because the teachers like, this is what we're going to do. Everybody's going to use a calendar and we're going to use it like this. And everybody's going to do this way. And that sounds great in theory, but the fact is this type of calendar doesn't work for every kid. So if the type of planner you give out doesn't work for the way that kid's brain works, then they have to do some of that exploratory work to figure out what kind of planner does work for them. And the upside is, now we have the internet and you can go online and you can find all different kinds of planners. Some are hourly, some show a weekly plan, some show a daily plan, some show the entire month, some show just your list for the day of every 5 minutes. Every kid works differently. And I think it's really important to understand, if a kid won't use the planner that you're giving them or suggesting, some of the kids may be defiant, but some kids may just be, this just doesn't work for me. So part of your role as an adult is to help them seek out a system that does work for them. Download things off the internet, say, okay, we'll try this one for 2 weeks. And if this one doesn't work, we'll try a different one. And you just kind of have to keep exploring until you find a system that does work for them. Another option is master calendars. I think you're behind me, Kelly. Whether or not you have a master calendar for your classroom or your home, again, color coding can be great. If you have a classroom with a variety of classes, say it's younger kids and you have English and math and social studies or whatever in that class, then you can color code the different assignments in your master calendar in your room by which class or topic it is, which is great for kids to see the entire week or month in advance and see what's coming up and understanding what's due every day. If you're older, in middle school, high school, and you just have an English class, again, color coding so that grammar assignments are one color, spelling assignments are one color, essays are a color, is really helpful for kids to understand what's coming up. And this works also for family calendars. If you have a family that you're working with that is has trouble being organized, you might want to recommend a master calendar for them. And yes, this horrifying thing is my family calendar from about 5 years ago. And I would say this is after one of my kids left for college, so I've actually lost a color here.
Hi, Nan. We have a question in the Q&A box. One of the coordinators is asking if you could, if there was a possibility of sharing these slides with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you send them after, send me, then I can get them out to people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and again, we've color coded everything. Everybody in my family had a different color for their person, and mine was colored. Kelly, when she does her family master calendar, everybody also has an initial. So like this might have been soccer, N for Nathan, or I want to say dress rehearsal for Alec, but I don't think that would have been right. But so everybody gets their own color or their own color and initial to try and keep your family organized. I'm also going to tell you like a secret tip on here that I can't show you on this picture is I actually have 2 months worth of calendars. So that way I can have the current month and the next month, because usually when like deadlines and stuff are coming in, they're for the following month. And then I like move one up and I erase the next one and move it down. When I started doing this several years ago, I'm going to tell you flat out, my husband thought I was nuts. He's like, why do we need 2 of these? That's crazy. And now he can't live without it. And we take up a very, very large portion of the side of our refrigerator with this type of calendar. Even though there's only 2 of us in the house now, we still live by this. And again, because he will not use a Google Calendar. So this is what I'm stuck with. Like these are just some of the different kinds of calendars that we found. And there's, like I said, tons of different kinds of calendars out there. So every family and every teacher has to find the calendar that meets their needs. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. Probably not everybody wants the obsessive rotating calendar such thing that I've got going on, but everybody does need something that keeps their family together. And this slide is one of the things that I spend a lot of time using and talking to our students about when they come to me with organizational or especially time management issues. And this is what I have them do. I have them block out all of their time and a weekly calendar for times that they are busy. Because they only come to our program one day of the week, their calendars actually start on the day that they come to us for class, because that's how we figure out their homework. What's due by next week at this time. So you'll see on this calendar, like all the pinks on here are when they're in school. And then the grays are the days that they come to ATIP, because this student came to ATIP twice a week. On here, they're going to also mark anytime they have, like a sports commitment. Like this kid looks like they might have had like soccer practice from 6 to 7 on Monday and Wednesday, and then games on Saturday afternoons or Saturday mornings. And it looks like they've got Friday at 8 p.m. Maybe they have family movie night. And then on Sunday, they're probably going to church and they've got youth group Sunday night. So the reason I have kids do this is so they can see the blank spaces where they have time to do their work in bulk. A lot of our kids are pretty overcommitted, and they need help seeing where the time is that they can get things done. When we look at these blocks of time, I also talk to them about how they want to use that block. Some kids like to say, I'm going to get this, this, and this done, and they'll have a to-do list of things they want to get done during those times. And other kids would just say, I'm going to work for this chunk of time, and whatever I get done in that chunk of time is great. It just depends, again, on how your kid's brain works, and this is the kind of thing that they have to be kind of a researcher about. How do I best use these chunks of time? Sometimes we also look at times where they look like they're going to be busy, but maybe it just means that they're not at home. Like So my daughter was a dancer, and my younger daughter spent a lot of time, sitting in the car waiting for my daughter to be done with dance practice. And that sitting in the car time was time when, oh, if I have something that I have to read, that's a portable assignment and we can bring it with me in the car. So we're also looking at times where, like, what is the best work to be doing in this block? We also use this for thinking backwards for planning purposes. If I have an assignment that's due on Tuesday and I want to give myself a cushion day in case of an emergency, so I want to have it done by Monday, what do I have to have done by Sunday to have that project done by Monday? And then what do I have to have done by Saturday to do the work that I need to do on Sunday? And doing all that backtracking, so kind of figuring out how to do that planning process. What do I have to have done each day to get to my assignment done in time? And usually we start figuring that out by working backwards. Just a couple of comments about helping students manage their materials. Kelly used to threaten her son Alec that she was going to come to school and clean out his locker, but she only had to do it one time because he found it so embarrassing that he managed to keep his locker clean enough that she did not have to come back. We know, at least I know, I had teachers complain about my kid's desk. And I have to say, if a kid is managed to turn in assignments on time, then hopefully they can avoid the embarrassment of having their parent come to the school to clean out their desk or their locker. Backpacks are a different issue. We recommend, especially if your child has problem being organized, starting out helping them to clean out their backpack probably once a week. If you help them once a week, then you can kind of train them to get to the point where they can empty it out themselves. Otherwise, you're probably going to get to the end of the semester or Thanksgiving break and realize that there are things living in the bottom of the kid's backpack. So do that. But also think about, well, some kids struggle with tidiness. If they're turning their homework in on time, is this something that's worth having a battle about? I know for some teachers and some moms, you go in for parent-teacher conference and you look at your kid's desk and you just oh, this is the most embarrassing thing ever. But if is this worth the battle? If your kid can find their stuff and turn it in, it might be one of those things, you let go of. Keeping in mind that cleanliness is not the same thing as orderliness. They can't keep old peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in their desk. But if, they can keep the bugs away and they turn stuff in, think about whether or not this is something that you want to really fight with them about. And we're going to show you some pictures of desks later on that are going to make you realize that maybe you don't have to. And these are ideas that we got from teachers on the front lines. I gave this presentation and had a couple teachers make suggestions that we really liked. First of all, if you're at a school where the school lets you carry the backpack around, this is helpful to let the kids pack their backpack as they go. I went to science class, I have science homework, I'm going to put my science homework in my backpack right now so that I don't have to worry about it at the end of the day. If you don't have access to your backpack or that doesn't work, keeping their folder stacked in their schedule order, first hour, second hour, and again, color coded so you know which is which. This will help them at the end of the day when they have to grab their stuff in a hurry. I don't know about you, my kids had 5 minutes at the end of the day to get their stuff from their locker and to get on the bus at the end of every day. That was it, 5 minutes from the last bell, basically until the bus is pulled out. We live in Michigan. In January, that means you're not only getting all that stuff, but you're putting on your boots and your hats and your gloves and your mittens, and you're trying to get all of your stuff in your backpack. So anything you can do that helps them to preemptively be organized throughout the day so that they have more time at the end of the day means that you don't have to do what we did, which was frequently drive back to the school and asked my brother-in-law, who was the custodian, to let us in because my kid's homework was locked in her homework, several times during the evening. And we couldn't get our stuff, if Maddie wasn't the custodian, we'd never have gotten homework done. And the last thing, and we don't have a slide for this, we sent Karen a list of time management tips that she is going to put in a Google Drive for you. We're going to say that these are tips that we primarily use with middle school and high school students who are kind of in charge of their own homework time and deadlines. But you can pick and choose from those to share with students. And normally what I do is when I talk to students is I ask them to pick one or two that they might find most useful and try them for a week to see if they help, doing their research and Sherlock Holmes thing, and then come back to me and say, this worked, this didn't work, and then try a couple more and see which one of those work until they have kind of a list of strategies that they find most helpful.
I did just drop that Google Doc in the chat. So everybody, all participants, you can find the Google Doc to those tips in the chat box.
So with the backpacks, without my son being able to take his backpack from class to class to class, I don't think he probably would have ever graduated from high school. This is exactly the way he managed middle school and high school, is keeping everything in his backpack because otherwise it didn't come home. So, you know, you have to find those strategies that work. It worked for us because then I could have him clean out his backpack every week and get rid of the junk or the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or whatever else managed to get in there. And then organize and make sure we had everything that he needed. But if the teacher said, you didn't turn in so-and-so, he had it with him. So it was his savior for being able to get through school. So there are some other things that you could do with students to help them to be able to learn about organizational strategies. And one of those is to find a role model or mentor that maybe they appreciate being, that are organized. So perhaps their coach is a good role model for them, or some teacher in the school is a good role model for them, but have them ask them who they think is organized, and then have them ask that person, how do you stay organized, and to see how they stay organized. A lot of times if kids can discover ways to do it, they're more likely to want to do it. And this way they, especially if it's somebody they look up to, then they're gonna want to do those strategies more. And if they don't think of anybody, then have them think of somebody that they admire in history and have them look up how they were organized. Leonardo da Vinci is a good one to use because he had so many different inventions, and he had to keep things straight in his head about what he was inventing. And you can either research them or just have them think about how things would be, how that person might organize themselves before then or now using technology. So make it a fun little game. A lot of the exercises that are, the things that are coming up come from a lot of the research coming out of the field of students with ADHD, but they hold for students regardless of whether or not they have a deficit in executive functioning or just need to learn how to do executive functioning. A lot of times, if you can have a time in the morning with students where you can figure out what the needs are for the day, this works for teachers as well as it works for parents, because if you know what's to be expected during the day, then you're more likely to be able to do it. So have some sort of morning meeting or have some sort of chart that lets the students know what's expected that day or what's going to be different that day. That helps with transitions as well as helping with them to be prepared. Developing social stories is an exercise that comes out of the research behind autistic students. It helps the autistic students especially, but it'll help any student to be able to figure out what they should do if they're going to have, if they know they're going to have problems. So if you know the student has test anxiety, or you know the student doesn't like transitions or whatever, develop a way to play act those things and have them figure out ways that they could maybe diffuse the situation. And as the parent or teacher, figure out plans of action for when students are not getting it and have to have a meltdown. It happens to everybody. Every teacher has had some student have a, pretty much a temper tantrum on whatever level it might be. Middle schoolers are a lot different temper tantrums than the 5-year-olds, but they all have their meltdowns, and they all have their points where you have to have some sort of plan of action in mind for where it is. And then, just because a student's gifted does not mean they don't have some sort of learning disability. So look for those learning disabilities and look for where they need some academic support. So if they need academic support, find that academic support for them. That will help them in all of the areas in their life. So we try to work with our students on their strengths as much as their weaknesses. So when we are looking at, a paper that they've written, we want to point out the good things in the paper as well as the things that need to be worked on. This works just as well with students that have issues around executive functioning. Figure out what their strength is and then use it to help their weakness. So if they talk too much, if that's one of their weaknesses, but it's also can be a strength because they will answer questions when they're asked, then work with them and have them be the one that's going to answer questions when you really need it. So have a signal so that they would then they would know that it's their turn to really answer the question, or maybe it's their turn to ask a question. Also, if you can figure out the different learning styles for your students, that helps them to be able to learn the best and you to be able to tailor the learning environment. So there are all sorts of ways out there that you can look at different learning styles. So, maybe pick some and try them with your students and see how they work and see where they need to be added to. And then the biggest thing I think is that we can't assume that gifted kids know what to do. So they know the academics so well that sometimes we think they should know how to be organized and they should know how to manage their time. And, they've never had this problem before, but the students really do need those strategies taught to them. And what we talk about in our program a lot is that most of the time the students that come to us are at their 2 to 3 grade levels ahead of their peers in either math or English, and they're not having to work hard. Most of them, even if they're not 2 to 3 grade levels, are at least a grade level ahead of everybody in the school. So they're really not ever having to learn these skills. So you have to figure out a way that you can teach these skills to the students, that they need them. So give them a challenge that they have to plan their time for, or give them a challenge where they have to work backwards to be able to solve the whole problem. So show them the need for learning these skills and then teach them those skills. So that's kind of along the same lines as, create problem-solving, decision-making opportunities to do that. You need to watch the students for overstressing themselves and figure out ways to reduce the stress, do some mindfulness techniques, whatever it takes to reduce the stress, because when a student is in stress, they're not going to worry about organization. And then we like to think a lot about the work that Carol Dweck has done on mindset, because I think gifted students' parents tend to think that their students should always do their best, and that if they come home with something that's not quite an A, then they didn't do their best. And so then that's awful, because they expect their kids to do their best all the time. And we talk to parents about the fact that nobody does their best 100% of the time. I can tell you at least 5 times today where I didn't do my best. And so we need to make sure that students are allowed to have those times as well, and that we're really praising them for their process and for their hard work, and not just because they got 100% on the test that they didn't study for. So kids definitely gifted kids have their own agendas and they want to do things the way they want to do things. So we can't influence everything, but we need to try to influence as much as we can. But there are always going to be those people out there. And, I think I'm probably one of them. Nan and I are very good at what I call the just-in-time processing. We have this talk today. We are going to go over it just in time. We have a deadline for a meeting on Thursday. We are going to have everything done just in time. And, that really motivates us. We are good at it, and it's our organizational strategy that works. But it may be for younger people, they don't have the background knowledge to know how long it's going to take them. So using that to say that, day 0 is 3 days away, but in order to get to day 0 and be done, what do you have to have done on, day -3? So, so you need to make sure that they have those skills to be able to process that. And maybe make some artificial deadlines that gets that adrenaline going so that they will get it done and not wait till the last minute. So it works for just-in-time processing, works for Nan and I because we know how long it's going to take us to get ready for things, and we know that we can do it in that amount of time. It's not going to work as well for kids because they don't have the experience. I'm not going to call us old, the experience that we have. So here are some pictures that Ellen Fiedler showed us of her office the first time we went to give this talk. So on the left is how it was, and it got to the point where it was causing her anxiety because she was losing things. So she decided it was time.
Her boyfriend yelled at her for her desk.
Oh, yeah, and
it caused Ciro anxiety more than it caused Ellen anxiety.
Ellen felt she could find everything in her desk, but Ciro was convinced she couldn't. So she cleaned it all up and got the desk on the right. Unfortunately, that never lasts with Ellen, so pretty soon it started creeping back to the other way. But if you can convince somebody that the right-hand side is less anxiety, then that's a good thing. If not, and the left-hand side is working for them, then you might need to leave it be. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of perspective about how having a messy desk is not necessarily the end of the world, I have some pictures to show you of Al Gore's desk when he was in the White House. There, I couldn't find anything in that desk, but I do like the 3 monitors. I only have 2, and I think I want one more. I'm liking that, to have a surround screen, And Albert Einstein's desk, only in black and white, sorry, was not very neat either. So there is hope for these kids, even if they are messy, and even if they do lose things, and even if they do struggle with time management, there is a way forward and they can still be successful. And just in case that doesn't work, then perhaps pointing out that the teacher's big book of easy crosswords is underneath that mess and hidden might keep the students from having to repeat 3rd grade. So we do have a copy of this presentation that we can send to Karen. I meant to say that at the beginning and I forgot. At the end of the presentation is the references where a lot of that material came from. So if you really, really like to learn about organizational strategies, you can look up some of these things and see the research behind it. And normally we just ask the participants to send us an email and we send them the electronic copy, but the easiest way would be to send a copy to Karen, and then you guys can all have a copy of it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat again.
Yeah, I see George's question about a bedroom. And I'm going to say it really depends on your kid. And I would probably, even though as a mother it nearly kills me, say that again, cleanliness is, or not being clean is not okay because we don't want to invite bugs or critters. But messiness is something that they have to tolerate as long as they can find the things that they need to find. That being said, I would make sure that there is a clear path from their bed to the door or to a window in case of a fire. I mean, you don't want your bedroom to be a fire hazard or an invitation for pests, but otherwise, your kid has to live in a situation where they can find things and they can be happy. And then I'm also going to say that they may surprise you as adults. Some of them may still be messy, and some of them may become like mine, who was messy as a kid and now is like supremely anal and everything has to be super clean all the time.
I was a messy kid, and now I'm more organized.
I have a question. So when we're dealing with like our older students, and you talk about using the different colors and things like that, and I mean, I've read that strategy many times. Any advice on trying to convince some of our boys to actually embrace using the different colored pens or different color coding? Because a lot of them that I personally have dealt with, including my own son, just getting them to, want to try anything like that is a challenge.
Sometimes using technology to do it is easier. They feel that it doesn't seem so girly if they're doing it on an app.
Uh-oh, they froze.
My kids are not really color kids, but they were pretty good about labeling things. So, using letters to label what it was, like this was a homework assignment, this was a reading assignment. So they would label them by letters. So finding some different way that they can label things that's not necessarily color that might work better with their brains.
And if they do kind of like the idea of the color because they're visual, but don't want to do the pens and stuff because that seems kind of girly, the technology, you can like color code stuff in your Google Calendar and stuff also. I mean, all of those things come with ways to color code those. So you can make, soccer orange and band blue or whatever. So if you suspect that they're visual and it might help them, but they just don't like the stickers and stuff that seems too feminine for them, you can combine the two. You can combine the color and the technology in a way that a boy might use.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be happy to read them out, or they're reading them. We'll give everybody a minute or two. And I think I fixed the permissions. You should be able to ask or get into the Google document.
And people can ask questions from the Google document too if they can read it.
The only downside of using Zooms and things of not being able to be in person, because I know everybody, if we were in person, would be having lots of questions.
Yeah, we had a place in there where I was going to ask them to give different ideas, and it